Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and with us on our panel tonight is Thaddeus Polhamus.
I do.
Daniel Thomas.
Hello.
And Merrick Moses.
Hola.
H.R. 1 for the People Act passed the House in early March. H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, passed the House in late July last year. So far, these bills have yet to be voted on in the Senate. Meanwhile, in 43 Republican state legislatures, thank you, Koch brothers, they're pushing over 250 bills designed to suppress the vote. Among them, a Georgian bill recently signed into law that makes it a crime to give a drink of water to voters standing in line at the polls in that deep southern state. Jim Crow Part 2. The American Rescue Law was a great achievement in delivering relief to those affected by the pandemic, but voting rights seems to be a pretty big issue in the larger realm of racism and white supremacy. Federal law takes precedence over state law, so if these two bills pass in the Senate, the 250 voter suppression laws in the state legislatures become moot. What is your take on the historical significance of this moment in regard to this issue? How important is this in regard to history? Dan?
This is a big one. This is we are going to remember this. This is a movement. What we are seeing right now is the death gasp of a people who are desperate to hang on to power and relevance. And the For the People Act represents an existential threat to the Republican Party as it exists now. I'm not saying it can't be reformed and fixed somehow, but you got to move past this white grievance, people. You just got to do it. I listened on NPR today to an interview with Georgia's Secretary of State defending the bill, and I listened to Pod Save America yesterday where they were explaining all the things that are wrong with it. So let me talk about where I see there being problems. Georgia has expanded early voting, but reduced the number of drop-off boxes for absentee ballots. And Georgia is now requiring that in order to vote absentee, you have to have a driver's license. That has absolutely no correlation to the number of African Americans living in the state of Georgia who don't have driver's licenses because they don't need them. Lots of people who live in big cities don't need them because they use public transportation, and a car is a horrible added expense. So why would you do that to yourself?
A lot of young people don't have cars either.
Yeah, but why would you have a license if you're never going to drive? Mm-hmm. That's my point. So yes. If Georgians in Atlanta don't have driver's licenses, they can't vote absentee, but they'd still take public transportation and they have to go to work. So you're knocking those people out of the ability to do it unless they go and get that license. Secretary of State doesn't mention that part. He also says that we're reducing, I believe Atlanta is in Fulton County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So in 2020, Fulton County had 38 drop boxes in it. They are going to go to 8 drop boxes. The logic here is that, well, we're going to have 1 drop box for every 100,000 people who live in the county. And on the surface, doesn't that sound nice and normal? It makes it fair for everybody. We'll expand early voting by 2 days, and we'll have drop boxes based on solely on the number of population. The problem is you are cutting off the votes in Fulton County where the Black people live, while maybe another county only has 2,500 people in it. So they get one drop box for all of them, whereas 800,000 people over here only get 8. So you're prioritizing the value of those 2,500 rural white Trump voters over the value of the 800,000 other people. And that is not equity. even even if that's how you're trying to frame this argument, um, it's been a very long time since we wrote into law the racism, but it's baked right in. It is a feature. So yeah, and
But
even
the biggest complaint I've been hearing is that the local officials are not really allowed to certify. It's the legislature that makes a decision whether that particular voting should be certified or not. That's
yeah,
the biggest complaint I've been hearing about this Georgia law.
well, that's going to be the ultimate power grab because that allows the Georgia state legislature to ignore the will of the people completely. And when you have, I'm not going to get into gerrymandering as an I don't know enough about Georgia's gerrymandering problem the way I know about Pennsylvania's gerrymandering problem, so I can't speak intelligently on it. I do know that if you let your politicians pick their voters, those politicians will remain in power as long as they want their seats. I know my congressman is going to be around as long as he wants to be because he can't be beaten as the district currently stands. And in part of the For the People Act requires states have nonpartisan redistricting committees do the redistricting. There are states that do that now. They are all states controlled by Democrats with Democratic legislatures. The Republican legislatures will not give up that power willingly. So that holds on to it, and having there are no bodies more partisan than your state legislatures, Republican or Democrat. They're all extremely, extremely right wing or left wing and cannot be fair because they are baked in those ideologies. If you don't have someone nonpartisan doing it, you are going to wind up with a mess, and that is what is going to happen. And Georgia might as well not be a state anymore because they are taking away their democracy unless we can get the For the People Act to pass. And the For the People Act needs to pass. And I have received emails from both my Republican senator and my local congressman explaining all the reasons why they don't like it, because it causes public funding for elections. But I want more bartenders like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be able to actually run for office. I want more working people. It doesn't have to be some business mogul who's got a lot of money, but that's what we get because regular people can't afford to do it. So I want the For the People Act to pass, but it does represent an existential threat to the Republican Party. They're going to have to do some things that are actually popular and not cheat if they want to live in a post For the People world. And I don't think they're ready to make that step.
Merrick, voting rights, the historical significance of this moment. How significant is it?
The democracy that we hold dear is at stake. What you have is, as Dan said, you have a party in the last gasp. And instead of reforming their platform, they have decided to double down on white grievance, sexism, and homophobia and transphobia. That being said, that this bill needs to pass, but we have obstacles like Moscow Mitch in the Senate. I'm sure the whole Republican caucus in the House will basically not vote for it. And what you have is you have people that are scared of the future. But whether they like it or not, the future is here, and the future is black and brown. So they can do what they want now. However, we the people must speak, and this act really does need to pass. We must overhaul our democracy. If 2020 didn't show us that, then we're blind.
Thaddeus, existential moment here for our democracy with these laws about to be passed in the states and the federal law about to make them moot?
There is. I'm going to say gatekeeper problem. I say this law would provide a neck snapping about face to this tsunami of voter suppression legislation on this in the states. It would be a godsend to the practice of democratic self-rule as we know it, or as we think we know it. It would assure that the voices of all citizens would be heard throughout the country, but it won't. Commissar McConnell holds the whip that wouldn't allow a single GOP vote for it, even if there were a case of a senator who knew that his voters in his district were 100% for it. You know, I think that we desperately need these laws, but I think that it would take a miracle to get them passed.
Well, ending the filibuster would be that miracle then, right?
That would help. But it would take a miracle to do that.
Yeah.
I want to jump in on that filibuster comment.
Go ahead.
John Ossoff and Perdue and Biden and Harris, they did not get elected to do nothing.
You mean Warnock, not
Or
Perdue,
Warnock,
Yeah.
yes. We need to kill or reform the filibuster because if we don't, we're never gonna get anything done. And if we as Democrats do not have the political will to make that happen, we are gonna lose in the midterms and both the House and the Senate, and we deserve it. We deserve that loss if we can't get stuff done. And right now, we're on a roll, but we need to keep that momentum going. We lost minimum wage because of the filibuster. It got taken right out of the bill. And we don't have a replacement proposal for it yet. Like, I didn't think we were going to get 15, but we might have gotten 11. I think that as long as the filibuster is in place, and we have the 50-50 Senate, even if we've got Vice President Harris casting that tiebreaker, we're not going to be able to do enough. And we need to put that down. We need to destroy the filibuster, and we need to pass voting rights. We need to pass minimum wage. We need to pass infrastructure. All this good stuff needs to go through 51 simple majority, and then let the Republicans try to take it away. If these things are so horrible, then sure, you take control of the Senate, try to appeal it. We saw you try to do that with the Affordable Care Act. Good luck.
Eric, I'm going to let you make a comment on the filibuster. The points that Dan brought up before moving on to the next question.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a relic of the racist past. That being said, what is more alarming to me is how Sinema of Arizona and Manchin of West Virginia are blocking this. And I'm trying to figure out what I guess it's their donors or whatever, but they're standing in the way of progress. I don't see why majority rules don't apply here. Clearly, things need to change.
In 2020, state voter suppression laws in places like Pennsylvania and Georgia seemed to galvanize the minority vote to the extent that they showed up in big numbers to vote against Trump and to vote for Ossoff and Warnock. The minority electorate, as well as a few of us white guys, understand, for the most part, the goal of these voter suppression laws. Do you think that it will make them attempts at voter suppression possibly backfire on the voter suppressors? Could this backfire on them? Piss off enough people? Merrick, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure Stacey Abrams and I think her name is Latasha Brown of Black Voters Matter. I think they already have plans in the works to mobilize people. And I'm sure the ACLU is going to challenge this law in court. But when I tell you they have a plan or they're formulating a plan, they are. And I hope Brian Kemp is voted out of office in 2022.
Going to backfire, Thaddeus, or do you think that these voter suppression efforts will be successful?
Well, just based on what the voters of Georgia did last year, I would say this can happen. This backfire just might work. I would love to see Stacey Abrams cloned in all 50 states because she is the organizer of the age. And I want to, I would like to see people organizing the way she has organized the voters of Georgia happen in all of those states where they're initiating these voter suppression laws. And I think I even heard Ms. Abrams say something on TV a couple of weeks ago that they are communicating with their agitators in just about every state that they can reach to get the people down on the street level, to mobilize troops and say no matter what impediments they put in front of the voters are going to get out and pass their votes anyway. This would be it would be a beautiful change of heart for the American people to see all of us participating in the democratic process for a change. I got hope.
With the pandemic over, we could start knocking on doors again.
Bingo.
Yeah. Dan, could this backfire? All this voter suppression effort?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The lesson that Republicans learned from 2020 was not to be more inclusive, was not to be more popular, was not to offer things that people wanted. It was to make it harder to vote. If it does backfire, the lesson that will be learned is we got to suppress better. That being said, it doesn't really matter to me if it backfires or not. The fact that it exists is offensive on every conceivable level to me as an American citizen. As someone who was born with the right to vote, who's never had that questioned, I am offended on behalf of everybody else who had to work harder for it. And it's not okay that this is the tactic.
In 2013, a 5-4 Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder, the court gutted a provision of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which provided Department of Justice oversight to any changes certain states with histories of racial discrimination tried to make to voting procedures. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts opined, our country has changed. Congress must ensure that legislation to remedy the problem speaks to current conditions. In 1965, the states could be divided into two groups. Today, the nation is no longer divided along those lines. Given recent events, do you think Chief Justice Roberts has some crow to eat for those words he wrote in 2013? Or do you think he still believes we are no longer divided along those lines. Thaddeus, what do you think about that?
I think that Justice Roberts fully understood the disingenuity of his comments when he wrote them. A nice analogy is that a schizophrenic doesn't feel schizophrenic when he takes his meds and, going by his feelings, quits taking those meds and promptly goes into a psychotic episode, sometimes doing harm to himself or others. Shelby Holder was, with Robert's recommendation, the state's go-ahead to go off their meds. It was noted at the time that several of the states affected, knowing that this decision was coming down, had their new voter suppression bills already drawn up. And as soon as the decision was announced, rushed them into law, some literally on the same day as the decision. The moral of the story is, if somebody petitions to have a law struck down, you can bet your daddy's farm that they intend to do whatever it is that that law forbids. No, I don't think Justice Roberts was being naive, and the results that happened because of it didn't surprise him in the least or dismay him.
Dan, Justice Roberts knew what he was doing the whole time and still believes what he's saying.
Oh, he didn't believe it when he was saying it. When I can look at this last year and the pandemic as, well, let's say a metaphor right now, or a comparison. So last spring, cases in Pennsylvania were very, very low because we had gone on these very strict lockdowns, and it seemed like it wasn't a big deal. So we started easing restrictions that were actually working, and then things promptly went the hell out of control. This is what Roberts' decision did. The rules that were in place were working, and because they were working, they had to be gotten rid of, and he made a calculated, deliberate choice to get rid of them. I really believe that I believe that the whole issue is a reaction to President Obama's election, because, oh my God, we elected a person of color who, of course, could not have been born here because people of color are not real Americans. And that's why, and the same lies are being circulated about Vice President Harris now. Nobody questioned if Joe Biden was born here, but I digress. What we have now is, because we took away those restrictions, because a black man got elected, so we must live in a post-racial America now, we have wound up deliberately removing the only protection that democracy had in place. Our institutions were strong enough to withstand it in 2020. They may not be strong enough to withstand it going forward, especially if we have places like Georgia who are taking the democracy out of democracy.
Merrick, Dan says it was a calculated and deliberate lie that Roberts said, when Roberts said we are no longer divided along those lines. Calculated and deliberate?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know how many people know this, but Roberts was one of the lawyers for the GOP in regard to Bush v. Gore, that. And so he has a vested interest in racist Republicans gerrymandering districts and doing what they want via gutting the Voting Rights Act. So he knew exactly what he was doing, and he is probably loving the fruits of his work right now. The disenfranchisement of millions of people, um, because the Republicans don't want to change their platform. They have zero, and they want it all, but they have zero.
Asian Americans have undergone a very tough year. It seemed to me that there was a lot of news coverage after the Georgian spa killings, where the guy went to 3 different spas and killed all these older Asian women. But then when they had the Colorado shootings, it seemed like that went off the air. But I'm asking if you have any comments on the difficulties that the Asian American groups have been experiencing. We're going to start with you, Merrick.
I think it's a tragedy that this has happened. But the history of anti-Asian sentiment in the United States goes back to the 19th century with the Exclusion Acts, the Chinese Exclusion Acts. There were also Chinese men that were lynched in San Francisco by white men. And then we have the Japanese internment camps. So America has a long history of that, and it didn't help that the former president kept making racial overtones for the coronavirus, calling it, well, we know what he called it. I'm not going to repeat it. So I think it's really disgusting that these Republicans, who basically are fomenting this hate, have no consequences. I think that's disgraceful.
Tough year for Asian Americans.
It was a tough year for Asian Americans, and it was probably about the 250th tough year for Asian Americans. I don't think that they have ever gotten the welcome that is their due, because they have always come, as far as I know, they have come freely to work in this country, and have been crushed underfoot. It seems to be a basic American thing with those of us who are Euro-Americans, that every time that there's another group of people that come in, especially if they look different, they have to be excluded. They have to be crushed underfoot. So, what has made it particularly bad for Asian Americans this year, though, has to be Trump, who pretty much hates everybody who isn't blonde and blue-eyed. But as Merrick pointed out, he has made a big deal of the supposed Asian invention of the coronavirus, if you want to put it that way. So, the whole thing has just been another excuse to ramp up another chapter in good old American racial hatred.
Dan, final word. Tough year on Asian Americans. Tough history.
When Joe Biden was talking about this, he said, "This is not who we are." And since he's been elected, I have had no cause to question Joe Biden's intelligence or powers of observation. He's proven to be pretty bright, except for that one moment where he said, hating Asian people is not who we are in this country. Merrick brought up the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Japanese internment camps. Our laws against opium. We were talking over Easter about how all of our drug laws are racially oriented in some way. Opium was the Chinese. We absolutely hate Asian people in this country, and we have for a very long time. There were no German American internment camps during World War II. And yet, We took every Japanese person we could find and locked them up. Um, so I guess my observation here is right now, support Asian owned businesses because they are hurting very, very much. And all the businesses are hurting, but the Asian people have active, viable threats to their lives right now. So it's okay to order the Thai food. Go indulge yourself that way. Um, and if you see something, say something. If you see someone is being harassed in the street for no reason, say something. Get in between. As white people who caused this mess, we do really have an obligation to try to fix it. So if we see a minority being harassed, put ourselves between the minority and the harasser. It's dangerous, but it's something that we have to do. We have to make ourselves enough of a threat to the harasser that they stop. We cannot let the little old lady have to hit the guy with the stick who's attacking her for no reason. We have to stand up and do something.
Mhm.
One final comment I'd like to make about what you're saying. Biden said, "This isn't who we are." It's exactly who we are.
Unfortunately.
America has been racist from the beginning. From 1619, America was racist, and so to make the outrageous denial that this isn't who we are is flat bullshit. And I want to thank Thaddeus and Dan and Merrick for joining us on this very important discussion on racism and white supremacy.